Good afternoon and happy National Apprenticeship Week. I want to thank you for joining us today for our webinar where we will be discussing strategies to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in registered apprenticeship. My name is Joshua Johnson, and I am the director of JFF's National Innovation Hub for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Accessibility in Registered Apprenticeship, where we're focusing on engaging with employers to help them to establish or achieve their DEIA goals utilizing inclusive registered apprenticeship programs. JFF's National Innovation Hub for DEIA and RA is funded by USDOL as one of the Registered Apprenticeship Technical Assistance Centers of Excellence. And our goal is to improve access and outcome for women, people of color, people with disabilities, workers who live in rural communities, people who identify as LGBTQ+, and all individuals who have been involved within the criminal justice system, with a goal of creating access points or visible access points for individuals to get in and access the promise of apprenticeship. Now, this work becomes so important because as we think about looking at a snapshot of apprenticeship equity, there are efforts to boost participation. They're working, but systemic change is definitely needed to drive equitable outcomes for all. And as you can see here, the numbers have grown slowly over the past 10 years. There has been steady growth, but we're really hoping to engage in this, using this conversation as well as other conversations. We're really hoping to engage the national apprenticeship community to continue to keep the growth of these numbers going. As we level set here for our conversation today, I want to talk about the DEIA definitions as outlined by JFF. And when we talk about diversity, we mean the representation and proactive valuing of varied identities, differences, and perspectives, honoring our lived experiences collectively and individually. We talk about equity, and in equity, we're talking about intentional distribution of access and resources to remove the predictability of success or failure that correlates with entrenched outcome disparities in our society. And we talk about inclusion, the creation of a culture of belonging that prioritizes the contribution and participation of all people in executing an organization's mission, values, and goals. And lastly, accessibility. When we talk about accessibility, the facilitation of full and independent access for all people to employment, facilities, services, and information through intentional design, development of accommodations, and respect for the wide range of human ability. So, on today's webinar, we're going to be joined by an apprentice, her employer, and a representative from the state of Wisconsin's Department of Transportation. And we're going to have a rich conversation around DEIA, the journey that they've been on, the successes and lessons learned. And we're hoping that throughout this conversation, that it gives you all, as you're listening, the ability to see the importance of embedding equity in your registered apprenticeship, whether you are a sponsor, whether you're an apprenticeship employer, whether you're an apprenticeship stakeholder, or whether you're someone who's just interested in knowing more about apprenticeship. Our goal after this webinar is that you will have the tools you need to start the conversations about embedding equity. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Amber Risky. Amber Risky is a construction craft laborer apprentice in local 113 out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Amber, it's so great to see you today. How are you doing?
It's great to see you too, Josh. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. It's National Apprenticeship Week, and when National Apprenticeship Week rolls around, it's like Christmas to me. Anytime we can get the word out about apprenticeship, and it's even more so like Christmas to me today because we get to hear your voice, the apprentice voice, which I feel is so impactful and so powerful to the message of DEIA. So I'm hoping today that you could share with everyone who's attending some information. So I'm gonna give you a couple questions and uh, share. Please feel free to share with the world. The answers that you have in your heart about the questions. So first and foremost, tell us about your background.
Well, thank you so much, Josh, for having me here today. As far as my background goes, I had a pretty difficult childhood. Um, when I was real young, I had a lot of traumatic things happen in my life, and eventually entered the foster care system in my early teens. Um, while going through the foster care system, I moved over 40 times from 12 to 18. I made a lot of bad choices. I had kids really young while I was still in high school. I was always trying to kind of find my way through life, and I didn't have really any stable guidance moving home to home. I didn't have any family. I didn't really have a clear path of where I was going in life. Having kids so young, it made it difficult to pursue something like work and school and caring for my children at the time. I did try to join a trade when I was around 18 or 19 years old, and at that time, I was turned away. I was told that the trades were no place for a woman, that there were just too many challenges that I would face in the field, whether it be other men or the work was too physically demanding for a woman. I was given a lot of excuses uh, for why I shouldn't be out in the field in the trades. Um, Going into my mid 20s, again, I couldn't find any good work with benefits or high wages or anything like that. And I was struggling to care for my children. I made a lot of bad choices, and ultimately I lost my children. I lost my freedom. I lost everything. There was a period of time where I was homeless. And then, I was in a vulnerable state after losing everything, and I ended up in a really bad relationship. Um, and I was going through a lot of abuse and kind of stuck under this person, and I didn't see any way out. And all of a sudden, I found out I was pregnant, and I felt like it was a another opportunity to be a good mom, after losing my kids and losing everything and making such poor choices in life. And um, at the same time, I didn't see any way out. I didn't see how I was going to be able to afford, you know, to take care of us and to leave this person. And having gone through the struggles I had already went through with my first kids, it was daunting, and my self-esteem was really really low. Um, but I had my baby and I kept fighting. I went and got my CDL. And after graduating from my CDL school, the only one to make it and the only woman in the program, I started getting a lot of confidence. They really supported me and encouraged me to be bold and to keep going. And I did, and they were connected with a program here in Wisconsin through the Wisconsin DOT heavy highway construction pre-apprenticeship program. And I remember meeting the coordinator for that program and um, feeling like, I was at a point in my life I can't lose anymore. I've been given another opportunity to be a mom. I can't lose anymore. I have to keep going. And for the first time in years, I had hope. I had so much hope. Um, she explained to me the benefits, that could come with heavy highway work, the high wages that could come with heavy highway work and joining the trades. And I had mentioned to her that I tried to join a trade years ago and was told I shouldn't because I'm a woman. And she told me times were changing, and that was kind of her specialty, to get more uh, women and minorities into the trades, into heavy highway construction. And we really connected, and she saw something in me that I hadn't quite seen in myself yet. So I'm forever grateful. I still tell her to this day, like, you saved my life. You literally saved my life, getting me here, getting me into an apprenticeship, and being here for me. She's followed me for the last 3 years now, and I think she's gonna follow me for a couple more years here in the future, and we'll for sure be lifelong friends. Um, but getting into my apprenticeship, I gained a lot more stability financially. I have health care for me and my baby, and a family here at Wallback. I have a family within my union. I have so much support still from that pre-apprenticeship program, and I'm forever grateful. I'm forever, forever grateful.
Nice. Well, Amber, from the moment I met you a few weeks ago, and you told me apprenticeship saved your life, and the story that you just shared, like it's so impactful. And I think, I'm hoping that the employers that are on the call here or on the webinar, as well as anybody else, they feel the same impact that I feel, even after hearing it for a second time, and understanding the power that apprenticeship does wield when an individual has an opportunity. And you gave us a little bit of your background. You also talked about you know, uh, leading up to kind of getting connected to registered apprenticeship. But could you cross that bridge for us and talk about, the connection that was made into registered apprenticeship and give a little more detail about that? And then can you share some of your experiences while you've been in your apprenticeship program?
So yeah, once I went through this pre-apprenticeship program, it it gave me a solid base. It didn't give me everything, but it gave me a solid base that I would need for prospective employers and joining a trade and getting into an apprenticeship. And I remember them calling me and saying, "Hey, Payne and Dolan has some openings over there at Waback Group. Put in your application right now, and I'm going to give them a call and see if we can get you an interview." And that's exactly what I did. I filled out my application here for Payne and Dolan, a Wallback Group company, and I think it was an hour, maybe less than an hour. I got a phone call. "Hey, can you come in for an interview tomorrow?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." Um, and I came in for my interview, and I was pretty much hired on the spot. And it was some time before I actually got in here, and I had to go to the union hall and join the union, and that was a process. And I remember them sending me a a wage statement when I first joined the union. They sent me a wage statement, and they sent Walbeck a wage statement, and I remember looking at that wage statement like, this this can't be right. Like, you wanna pay me how much? Like, I've never made this much money in my life, like, sign me up, like, there's no turning back now. Um, so yeah, so I started, maybe within a couple months. It was right after COVID lockdown, which was hard times for everybody, right? But I started here at Payne& and Dolan, and I remember coming in for orientation and getting a hard hat, and I had no idea what I was walking into. They gave me a name of a foreman I was supposed to meet and where he was at, and I went down there, and I didn't know asphalt was hot until I got out in the field. And just even after that first day, I was pretty beat up, and all I did was flag that day, and I remember feeling so lost, like, "How did I get here?" And, but I also kept in the back of my mind, like, where I came from. I have to keep going. I got my little baby at home, and, failure's not an option for me. We're gonna do this, and, I'm gonna totally immerse myself in learning everything I can. And I think also, I forgot to mention this, during my interview here at Payne& and Dolan, they were like, "Why do you wanna work here? What made you wanna come to us?" And I said, I wanna show up the boys." And I remember regretting that so hard on my first day, but, it's still something that I really strive for to this day. And, I wanna be out here and, showing them that I can do it too. I can work just like you. I might have to make little adjustments for my body because my body's built different, but you know, I can do the same things you can do. And there's been other women coming in that I've had the pleasure to meet in the last couple weeks, couple months. And they've struggled a little bit too. And I'm like, no, use your body. You have to use your body differently. They can't, teach you the same way. So, you know, now kind of transitioning into trying to mentor other young women coming into heavy highway, into asphalt, into the trades, you know, that's also been bringing me back and back to the basics and where I started, and it's been a pretty amazing transition in the last 3 years. From really learning and now really honing my skills, and now passing those skills on to others coming in and passing that confidence and support to other women out here in the field.
Wow, like I said, just amazing. To hear your background and to hear now your experience, and I love it. You told them I want to show up the boys. That's awesome, right? It's that mentality of getting out there and saying, just give me a chance, and I'll show you what I can do. And I think as we talk about DEIA, like that has to be the forefront of all conversations. Is we have to give people the opportunity to show us what they can do instead of determining based on how they look or how they speak of what they truly can do. So I love it. That was fantastic. Amber, uh, this conversation has been really good with you. So I got to ask, right? You're almost at the end of your apprenticeship. So you've had a nice little run here during your apprenticeship. But what has this opportunity meant to you? And like, where do you go next when you become a journey worker? Like, what's on the horizons for Amber Risky?
Josh, yeah, it's been a wild journey. And, I'm coming to the end of my apprenticeship, and I've learned so much in 3 years, and totally, like I said, immersed myself in my trade and my craft, and, wanting to be the best I can and fine tuning myself. And, um, there's still so many things for me to learn going forward. And, I have some goals. Some are short term, some are long term. I should be at my work hours needed for my apprenticeship, and then I have one class left. I still plan to take more classes though, because I find that they've really well rounded me at the training center out here in DeForest. Like, they've taught me so much, that helps kind of everything come together in the field, whether that's small engines or concrete or whatever. But going forward, you know, I I've been approached and kind of asked like, "Hey, would you ever have an interest in being a foreman?" And initially, I was like, the phone rings all day, every day, all night. I wasn't really sure, and they're like, "Well, you'd be, the first female paving foreman in a long time here, anyways. If that's something you wanted to consider," because they were kind of asking me where I wanted to go next as far as running equipment and things like that. And I told them I wanted to be on the back end, which is one of the more challenging things to do in the field. And I like the challenge. I like um, you know learning new things. And so those are kind of the next couple goals, is getting on a piece of equipment and learning those skills and honing in those skills, and seeing where that takes me from here. I also, you know, want to find a way to be out here supporting others coming in with backgrounds like mine, whether it's they're a woman or another minority. I want to be able to try to guide them and mentor them and teach them, and give them hope and experience and strength, through their journey too. And I'm not entirely sure what that looks like yet. Um, I just do what I can in the field right now to support them and gain more knowledge and experience myself. And um, I think one day at a time, it's all going to come together, and I'm going to get put where I need to be. Um, just kind of naturally learning throughout everything.
Well, I'm convinced, Amber, that no matter what you do after you complete your apprenticeship, that you're going to be highly successful. And I'm wishing you nothing but success. As a graduate of the Construction Craft Labor Apprenticeship at Local 113 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as well, I'm proud and very honored that you joined us today. for this webinar to share your story, to share such an impactful story that I hope many of the folks who listen today are ready to engage in these conversations around giving folks the opportunity, as I said, and not trying to think about what they feel, but really dig down deep and have the conversations internally on how they can create equity within their registered apprenticeship programs. So I thank you so much, Amber, and I wish you nothing but success as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's been an honor to be here, so I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Wow. What a great story. But it just gets better. I'm very fortunate to be joined here by Tracy Griffith from Walbeck Group, which happens to be Amber Risky's employer. Tracy is the Director of Outreach and Partnership at Walbeck Group. And I'm also honored to be joined today by Leah Collins Warchek, who is the Director of the Office of Business Opportunity and Equity Compliance with the State of Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Tracy and Leah, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Doing great, Josh. Thank you for having us.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I'm going to start with Tracy. Fantastic story you have there with Amber, one of your apprentices. I know that Walbeck has been doing for years a lot of work around DEIA. So can you talk about how Walbeck Group, how your organization began your work around DEIA?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, and it's great to see you, Leah and Josh. Thank you for having me. I don't know, I feel like Leah and I coming after Amber is going to be uh, big shoes to fill. But it's apprentices like Amber that really is part of the reason Welbeck does the work we do. So I look back to where our company really started, and we've always been committed to diversity and inclusion within our family of companies. Our second generation owner, Ned Bechtold, about, way back. He was very passionate about diversity and inclusion long before people even knew what it was or that it was needed, or even understood the importance of it. Ned would drive into different communities and go to faith-based organizations, and he'd talk about our company and offer employment opportunities to people within different communities, because even at that time, which was probably the late 70s, early 80s, he knew it was important. And back then, the boots on the ground work he was doing just was not a common practice. So we already were doing the work needed to build a diverse workforce for our company.
Nice. And Leah, with the state of Wisconsin Department of Transportation, can you talk a little bit about, the organizations, the employers that are connected to you in the heavy highway field and in the transportation field and their journey and how you're supporting their journey around the work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility?
Sure, I can do that, but I just need to echo what Tracy said. Amber's story was so inspirational. It was a humbling experience for me. I mean, she described such resilience and perseverance to get through the struggles in her life, and to know that being able to work for a state department of transportation, and all state department of transportations across the country have civil rights programs that are charged with ensuring that we really foster equity throughout our department, whether it's through the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program and making sure there's a level playing field for federally funded highway projects, or through our on the job training program to look at how we can outreach to historically underrepresented populations, like individuals like Amber. And so our program actually began in 1995. So it's been in existence for quite a while. And we developed the program with industry. So it included employers, associations coming together and looking at, first of all, we understood back then, and we still understand now that we still have a lot of work to do as it relates to incorporating diversity, as far as bringing on and creating that workforce through all of the levels in the heavy highway construction industry. And so back then, we put together a training program to, first of all, do that outreach, reach out to communities that we had not reached out to before, and working in partnership with community-based organizations to do that with industry. And so seeing that evolve over the years has just been, I think, impactful. And we're like a community, Josh, working with employers like Tracy from the Wallback Group, and working with industry and other employers coming together and trying to find solutions to making sure we have a diverse workforce. Do we have a long way to go? Yeah, we do. We definitely have a long way to go. But to hear stories like Amber's continues to motivate all of us to do that. So we're seeing some increasing numbers across different populations when we look at Wisconsin. We have a stakeholder group that we meet with on a regular basis to talk about how we are what we're doing and reporting out to folks about what we're doing to diversify projects, because we often hear from community members when they're driving around in their communities, they want to see the people that live in their communities reflect the work, or be those workers that are reflective in those projects that are receiving federal funding. And so we're striving to do that. And it's really good to work with partner employers like Tracy from the Wallback Group to do that. So we have this really, I would describe as a really robust training program to get there. And Josh, when you were the former director for the Wisconsin Apprenticeship Program, it was great to work with you to make our program a certified pre-apprenticeship program. So that really made the difference too, because it also said to industry, we have credibility. Our program has credibility, and the individuals that we are bringing into our training program from diverse backgrounds have the qualifications to be able to move towards registered apprenticeship. So it has really allowed us to do that. So I think acquiring that credential to be a certified pre-apprenticeship program back in 2021 really made the difference for us. And it really has helped us do even more, I think, outreach to diverse communities.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And I think it's that connection there uh, between Wisconsin Department of Transportation and its employers, right? That is so valuable of helping to create a pipeline, a ready-made pipeline of individuals who can go into the opportunities that exist within heavy highway work. And as we think about the like successes, right? The DEIA successes, there's probably so many to name. Whether it's from the DOT's perspective or from Wallback Group. But if you could pull out a couple, Tracy, just a couple of the successes that you've learned over your time, definitely at Wallback, and what Wallback has focused on. I know that we've had a few conversations about the successes. So if you'd be willing to share some of those, that would be great.
Oh, you're making me only share a few. I don't know if that's fair. So suffice to say, there are a lot of examples I could give. And one of the reasons I do work at Wallback Group was exactly what Leah said. When you're driving around and you look at who is on the road, I wanted to work with a company where I could see diversity. That has always been part of my background and part of the work I did in the 20 some years before I came to Wallback. So here, I think at Wallback, a couple of things I do want to mention is, we developed two employee resource groups that are really important. And people talk about employee resource groups, and I think sometimes they're done with good intention, but they're not done maybe in a full circle way. So we developed a Women of Wallback group, and that is to pull all of our women of Wallback together and help them reach their destination by giving and providing resources, support systems, and professional development. As not long after that, and right around the same time, we did developed a United Voices of Wallback, which is really connecting people with different backgrounds. And so those two resource groups has really solidified our work that we do around diversity and inclusion. We are doing intentional work. We're investing in our employees and hearing what they have to say. So I think those two groups have been really important. I would also, our recruitment, I've got to talk about our recruitment. And it's what Leah is talking about with the road building pre-apprenticeship program through Department of Transportation. We've worked with DOT's program forever, and it has morphed and changed as it's needed. And that's what employers have to do, morph and change. And we have been involved actively throughout Wisconsin in the program to help design it, to help with interviews, to help present to the class, to do mock interviews. So when employers are saying, what are the best practices? How can we recruit diverse candidates? It isn't always just going and sitting at a job fair and waiting for people to come to you. It is putting the work in and being involved in something in an intentional way. And that is talking, talking to community-based organization on a higher level, developing a partnership and trust. You have to have that. That's how you get candidates referred to you. That's how your reputation will precede you. And I think our company, people want to work for us. They hear about who we are and what we do. Leah mentioned something before about, seeing people that look like others. We redeveloped our marketing as part of our recruitment strategy. If you see it, you can be it. So if we are looking to recruit females and minorities, people have to be able to see that within Wallbeck Group. We have to show the whole picture of who we are as a company. So those are a couple of ways that we continually increase our diversity and have good strategies. I'll say the pre-apprenticeship program through DOT, that is a basic feeder for us. That is our pipeline. I call it our talent pipeline development tool. And Leah and I work very closely on the stakeholders committee to have conversations about how we can be supportive. What are we hearing from people? What are the needs from the employer side and from the apprentice side? You hear from somebody like Amber what worked, what didn't work. And so when we come together and talk about that, it's a win-win. I mean, that's our hiring tool, and people then aren't just hired in a job that ends. They're growing into the apprenticeship program. They're going to move within our company. The options are going to be limited. And Amber is a perfect example when she said, I think she looked up and kind of said, no, sky's the limit. I don't know which way I'm going to go. I could do this. I could do this. That's what we want to provide at our company, is a home for people who want to be here, who want to do the work that we do.
Definitely, and if you can see it, you can be it, right? These basic statements and the willingness of an organization to realize that are so key as we drive diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. Leah, as we think about successes, whether within Department of Transportation and engagement with the employers that are connected to you, or in the partnerships that you've created with these community-based organizations, as well as employers to make that connection, would you be willing to share any information on that? Some of your successes that you've seen in your time at Department of Transportation.
Sure. Hearing Amber's story, I think really outlines the successes. She just really, I think, just really pointed that out really well. It's that partnership. How she described it is really a seamless approach. She didn't necessarily know who all the players were involved with her journey, and I think that that's what's critical is when we come together as partners, whether it's state DOT, the employer, community-based organizations, workforce development systems, working in concert with one another, so that a participant or trainee like like Amber, who goes through the program, really is able to just navigate it without having to figure out who's doing what here, because we're all working in concert. We're all dancing to the same sheet of music, which is really critical. One of the things that I thought about related to this question is, It's not only how we outreach, but how do we talk about our industry? And Tracy mentioned marketing materials. So, yeah, we needed to take a look at that. Who is the face of our marketing materials? And looking at over the last couple of years, we've been through a pandemic, right? And that resulted in a very tight labor market. So we had to get pretty creative here to figure out how we're going to outreach to groups that have all of these different opportunities in front of them. And so, how do we talk about our industry? Amber had mentioned, that the work is, it's laborious work. It's hard work. But how do we use that? How do we talk about it in a positive way to attract diverse people to our occupation? And we had to really sit down and talk about that. Tracy mentioned the stakeholder group. So that was a success, being able to pull together stakeholders during the pandemic and really having to sit down and say, okay, what's working, what's not working, how do we need to collaborate differently to bring people into the pipeline, because we were struggling during that pandemic and afterwards because of what the labor market kind of left all of us with. And so getting together and having those really frank conversations in a safe space really helped. I think part of it also is making sure you get feedback. As a state DOT, it's important for us to get feedback from employers who continuously tell us about how we need to improve our program, and we need to be open to that as state DOTs. A lot of us are not workforce development professionals, and so we really need to be open to that feedback. It's just going to make our on-the-job training programs more richer. In addition to that is listening to our participants, and so conducting those surveys, getting their feedback, taking a look at how we're marketing, how are we talking to youth, and communicating with youth, which is very different than how we might communicate with an adult or someone who is an incumbent worker or somebody who's looking at changing careers. So I think over the last couple of years, we've had those conversations and are incorporating that and making sure that as we're talking about our industry, we're able to communicate that to diverse populations so that many different people have an interest. We offer good paying jobs and sustainability. And so I think we just need to continue to work on that positive messaging and really do what we can to talk about what employers like Tracy is doing at the Wallback Group to be able to create that. I love the hearing about those employee groups because that can really help retention, bringing folks in, but also retaining them. That is, I think, a really good support of DEIA efforts within an employer. So it's really good to hear that.
Definitely, and plus 1,000 to everything that you said, Leah, and to everything you said, Tracy. And I think one of the things that drives this, and one I really want to point this out, is partnership. There's been a partnership that has been created between an employer, between the state DOT, between community-based organizations. There's this partnership that has been created that, as you said, it makes it a seamless approach for individuals. And I think in that is something, there's a lesson to be learned in that and how we can make that seamless. And many times making it seamless is just having a conversation, finding out who to connect to and have that conversation. Because as you heard, as Amber shared her story, she talked about it. She didn't know what happened. It just happened, right? It's next thing you know, there was a connection to reach out. So I love the conversation around partnership and how important it is. And with that, JFF launched in early September. We actually launched our program design framework for DEIA NRA. And I'm very fortunate today to have our very own Vanessa Bennett, who is going to talk about the framework that was launched in early September. Vanessa?
Thanks, Josh. It's really great to be here. And first, I just want to say a huge thank you to Amber, Tracy, and Leah for joining us today and sharing their experiences with apprenticeship. I think you've sort of taken my talking points, which is wonderful. Everything you're saying is really aligned with the framework that we've developed. And it really provides, I think, really fantastic examples around what DEIA looks like in practice and how any partner, any stakeholder in apprenticeship can start to think about this work. So I do want to share a little bit more context around this resource. As Josh said, we launched this in September, and this is really a field-informed tool for employers and program sponsors and other stakeholders that are involved in developing these programs. And it's really focused on highlighting promising practices and tactics from the field around what DEIA looks like across a few different categories. So we have a visual here that offers kind of the three main pieces of our framework. We have employer structure, we have design elements for registered apprenticeship, and then we have partnerships. And Tracy and Leah have already highlighted some of these elements in their remarks, including recruitment, partnership, mentorship. But I'll offer some additional examples of things that you'll find in here. We chose to structure it this way because, as we know, registered apprenticeship is not happening in isolation to an employer. It sits within an employer. And so we started with employer structure to really acknowledge the importance of having an organizational commitment to DEIA. And we looked at two specific considerations here: leadership and staff diversity, and an employer's overall readiness and willingness to adopt, drive, and scale meaningful DEIA practices. And I think, Tracy, the example you offered of the Women of Waalbeck group fits so nicely into this, creating that space for women to come together and share their feedback and access professional development, but also develop a sense of belonging within the larger context of the employer. I think that's a great way to start to build that organizational diversity and to really support a population of workers, both within apprenticeship and outside of apprenticeship. From there, we layered the registered apprenticeship on top of this, and we have these design considerations grouped into two specific categories. We have apprentice experience and we have program management. And apprentice experience, we really wanted to suss out what those pieces of a program are that sort of shape how an apprentice sees themselves in a program, experiences a program, and develops that sense of belonging. And so we identified recruitment, accessible and representative instruction, quality mentorship, and retention services as being those critical elements to focus on to ensure that programs are equitable and accessible to all workers and learners. Again, I think Tracy and Leah have offered some fantastic examples of what this work can look like in practice, making sure that we are removing barriers in the recruitment process. That could include removing questions around conviction records, offering different opportunities for engaging in assessments that are accessible to different learning styles. And then carrying that into the overall instruction and design. So ensuring that our on-the-job training and related technical instruction environments are following ADA guidelines and providing opportunities for active and problem-based learning. From there, we really wanted to elevate mentorship, which we know is a requirement of registered apprenticeship, but such an incredibly important part of developing a program that is truly accessible and supportive of all apprentices. And I just have to give a kudos to Amber. I love that she has a goal of being a mentor, and I think, Amber, you'll be a fantastic mentor. But I think you really articulated that importance of being able to see yourself in your peers and of being in a program that is reflective of who you are, as well as of the community in which it's operating. And so making sure that we're really engaging mentors that are reflective of the community and investing in those mentors in ways that allow them to meaningfully engage with apprentices is so important to driving accessibility. We also looked at retention services, and we looked at this beyond just the idea of supportive services, so things like transportation and childcare, but also looked at retention services as things that help to keep somebody engaged by helping them to understand the value of the apprenticeship in helping them reach their long-term goals. So these are things like career exploration, navigation, helping an apprentice kind of understand the workplace culture and how to navigate challenges that might arise, providing support to remove financial barriers, or helping them to build their social capital by facilitating introductions to other apprentices, employers, community partners. All of these things, we've seen in the field be really effective at helping to enhance an apprentice's overall experience in their training, but also support their persistence and completion. And then we wanted to look a little bit at program management. And so we have 3 specific things that fall under this bucket. That's livable wages and access to advancement, creating that culture of belonging, and then also leveraging data to support equity practices. And we really try to advocate through this, and we're so fortunate to have input from many of our partners on the Innovation Hub around this, for providing competitive market rate wages, and also leveraging apprenticeship as a way to support access to mid and senior level occupations. We looked at developing cultures of belonging as ways of authentically incorporating participant voice, which, Leah just shared some great examples of how WisDot is doing this. And then also providing regular opportunities for apprentices to reflect on their experiences. Just as important as it is for apprentices to see themselves in a program, it's equally important that they have a voice and feel that they have a voice that's being heard within a program. And then we know that data decision making is so important, and data is becoming even more important in our workforce broadly, but certainly in registered apprenticeship. And so wanted to offer some recommendations from colleagues in the field around how to leverage data to support equity, how to support continuous assessment and improvement of DEIA practices, and how to be transparent with participants around what data is being gathered and why. Across all of this are partnerships. And again, I want to give a shout out to Tracy and Leah because they've highlighted so many different ways in which their partners show up in their program design and in their broader work. And as we know, apprenticeship takes a village. No one can do this on their own. So what we've offered throughout the framework are examples for how you can work with your partners to implement these various considerations. These are CBO partners you can work with, your state agencies like Leah at WisDot, your federal partners, employer partners, education partners. Also, we call out, working with an apprentice's peer network, making sure that their support system is involved in the process. Really looking to the diversity of folks in the community that can help to lift up this program, but more importantly, make sure that anyone who wants to participate in the program has access to the support that they need to be successful within it. I do want to say that this framework isn't a silver bullet for solving DEIA. That's a much bigger challenge ahead of us, but it does offer a starting point for new programs who are just beginning their DEIA journey. And it offers strategy to programs that already exist to help them continuously improve the training that they're offering. And I think one of the goals that we have overall for this framework is that different stakeholders can use this in different ways. So an employer like Walbeck may be able to pick this up and use it as a self-assessment tool to help them improve what they're already doing. A state agency like WisDot could use this as a vetting tool when working with new employers. And a CBO could use this to think about how they might partner with a program and what resources or services they might be able to offer to apprentices. So we're thrilled to have this out in the field. We're thrilled to be able to share it today. And again, I just want to say a big thank you to Amber, Tracy, and Leah, who have already shared so much that I think really is captured in this framework and have offered fantastic examples of what this looks like in practice. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this today. So Josh, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And Vanessa, as a co-author, one of the co-authors of the program design framework for DEI and RA, I want to say we definitely appreciate the work you did to get field-informed information that we could share with employers and stakeholders as we continue on this journey of creating equitable and inclusive registered apprenticeship programs. Tracy and Leah, now that the framework is like it's released, right? It's out there. Some of the things that we talked about before, right? And the successes, we talked about recruitment and mentorship, right? We talked about partnership. But now, as Vanessa just shared, right, all those things fall already within the framework. So each of your organizations have already been engaged in this meaningful, intentional work. But now that it's out there, like, what are next steps, right? You know, how might you use it as an employer or organization, and how would you encourage other folks to use it? Or is there anything in there that, as Vanessa talked about, that you're like, yeah, that is exactly what we're going to do as we're moving forward? Tracy, I'll let you go ahead and go first.
Was it great hearing Vanessa and having her, just watching her lay out so much of what we're already doing at Welbeck. So that's exciting to see. It gives us a validity and it gives the framework validity because what we are doing works and we see a difference in our numbers and in the culture of our company. Um, so I think that's really important. Our mentoring program that we have within Women of Welbeck Group, we're going to see an effect of retention and growth within our company. And one of the things that we took out of it, it's just as Vanessa added, almost a self assessment tool. We were getting feedback on our mentoring program that it was hard for the women in the field to be part of some of what we were doing. So we're already stepping back, listening to our employees, having conversations. How can we be better? How do we always make sure we're hearing what's being said and adapting to what those needs are? I think employers want to do the right thing. Oftentimes they don't know what that is or what it takes to get there. Perhaps they're doing pieces of the framework Vanessa just talked about. They're doing the recruitment, but they don't know how to do this piece, or they don't know how to develop mentoring or what that looks like. And I think with this framework, they have a real opportunity to reach out to you and to use this as a resource. Um, and see how the full picture can work. It's intentional work. It's putting both feet in. It's saying I need help. It's saying let's sit back and evaluate what we're doing as a company. And I want to say to Amber out there, when Vanessa reminded me, she mentioned wanting to be a mentor. So we have the mentoring program. Amber, I'm so pulling you into that first chance I get. So I do hope as a result, though, of this. What we're doing today here during National Apprenticeship Week, that the employers and people on the call realize that it is doable. Um, and there are places that works, and that sometimes it's okay to do a do-over, like where you have to sit and reevaluate. And I think that's what makes an employer successful, is the adaptability.
Definitely, and as I said, as this is released, right? This is great, right? This is field informed information that's being shared, and I would encourage employers to don't be intimidated or be afraid. And I would even take a step further, not necessarily a do over, but this is like, wow, I didn't realize that these are parts of it, and this is how we can really support the individuals who are already working for us in registered apprenticeship, or how we can utilize it to support those that we want to recruit into registered apprenticeship. Leah, any takes away from the framework being released? Any encouragement of folks to use it? How you plan to use it within Wisconsin Department of Transportation with the employers that you engage with? I'd love your feedback.
Well, first of all, that was a well thought out framework. I mean, it was very thorough. And as I echo what Tracy said, we're doing it. Um, I think there are ways that we can continue to strengthen in some areas, and I'll highlight some areas that I think we could do based on feedback that we have been getting through our stakeholder group. So one of the things is obviously in our training program we talk about career pathways, and I think that's critical, and that needs to continue once an individual is hired and they are in that apprenticeship. They have moved through that, and having their employer talk about those opportunities. And talk about those opportunities with folks who don't typically think about talking about those opportunities to. Sometimes it's great for us to be able to, I think, reach out to folks that we're not always typically used to talking to or engaging with, as it relates to diverse populations or diverse people in our workforce. And I think that's critical to do that. I'll just share. I heard, and someone that I admired, a great leader years ago, would say, look at all your employees as individuals that have potential. and really try to, as a leader, develop that potential within each of your employee, and and make sure that you're providing equal opportunity. So talking with those about those career pathways, I think, are critical after someone becomes employed or they go through that registered apprenticeship. I think the other thing that's really important too is mentoring. We've incorporated mentoring into our training program. That's something fairly new over the last few years, because we want to make sure that participants that graduate from our certified pre-apprenticeship program continue to have those mentoring supports once they become employed, and then working with that employer to see how we can create those natural mentorships within the workplace. The Waback Group has done a really good job of that, so we like to be able to continue to see how we can make sure that that's happening, because retention is really important. We focus on that recruitment part of it, but retaining individuals from diverse backgrounds is really critical. And I think mentoring programs have shown that they work if they are implemented thoughtfully and respectfully. And so I think that's another key area. And then lastly, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about within our groups is that within our system, when we look at the workforce development system, we provide a lot of supports up front through our training program, whether it's childcare supports, transportation. But that doesn't necessarily carry over once a person becomes employed or becomes a registered apprentice. And so what can we do as a system to address that so we don't lose people? We want to be able to attract more women and more people of color into our industry. Well, we've got to look at those support services. We've got to look at transportation. It can be a barrier. Childcare assistance. Childcare is expensive. What can we do in the early stages of when someone becomes employed to help them once they start earning those paychecks and getting those pay increases to be able to sustain that? So I think as a system, we need to continue to work on addressing that issue because it continues to be a barrier for disenfranchised populations. So I think your framework really gives us something to all take a look at and really see how we can really, I think, continue to improve the work that we're doing, and particularly in our industry. So I really appreciated hearing Vanessa outline that. And I think there's some things that we can definitely use. And I want to take that back to our stakeholder group and say, let's continue to have some dialogue here and come up with some strategies to address some gaps that we still have in our program services.
Definitely. And, I want to thank you, Tracy, and I want to thank you, Leah, for joining this conversation today. It's been so powerful to have your voices following behind Amber's voices. And as we talk about and look at the framework and understand that it's not the end, it's the beginning. And for what it sounds like, Leah, and what it sounds like with you, Tracy, it's the beginning to the continuation of the conversation on how you could continue to engage individuals from disenfranchised populations and get them engaged in registered apprenticeship. And that goes past creating access points. That means once they're getting in, finding a way to support them and make sure there's a culture of belonging. I find, as a former apprentice, I find one of the most powerful pieces is the apprentice voice. And I think today the apprentice voice was heard. Amber's voice, I feel like, was loud and clear. And I hope that everyone on here that is watching today, heard her voice and understood that there are thousands of Ambers out there who just need the chance to show up the boys, or who just need a chance to show what they can do. And I put that and I turn that over and I challenge each of you on here who are sponsors or employers to go out and find the Ambers. Find the Wallback Group, the companies who are out here doing that work, or who are active in trying to continue to grow the work they're doing. Find your state agencies, find your Department of Transportations, find your community partners that are out there. Find the individuals that have the Ambers waiting, just waiting for the chance to show what they can do. As I close out here, I want to thank Tracy from Wallback Group and identify that Wallback Group has signed JFF's DEIA pledge to continue to support inclusive registered apprenticeship programs. I want to thank Leah from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, who is also in the process of looking at signing the DEIA pledge. We're really looking forward to that process going through so that we can continue to celebrate these partnerships that exist in creating inclusive registered apprenticeship programs. And as I close out, I want to put to all of the employers, stakeholders, and sponsors that are here watching today, I want to urge you to reach out to us uh, here in the chat, as well as you'll see on the screen here the QR code. If you go ahead and take a picture of that or go to the link that's in the chat, I want to urge you all to sign our DEIA pledge as well. It's a pledge that's really helping us to create a community of employers across the country, a community of sponsors across the country who support inclusive registered apprenticeship programs. We want to know who those employers are. We want to be able to continue to talk about the promising practices. We don't want this to be the first and last webinar as we talk about the framework. We want to engage with those employers who are doing other parts of the framework. We want to bring them on. We want to talk. We want to learn the promising practices and be able to share them with employers that are out there either doing the work or are interested in getting the work started. So please, I urge you all to sign up, sign the pledge, make that commitment. Many of you are already doing it. Let's make that commitment in writing and just let us know the work that you're doing around DEIA in registered apprenticeship. I want to thank everybody once again. Amber, Tracy, Leah, thank you so much. And I want to thank you all for giving us your time today as we celebrate National Apprenticeship Week and celebrate today, which is the theme of National Apprenticeship Week for this day, the theme day, which is expanding registered apprenticeship to underserved populations. This work can't be done by us alone. This work has to be done with you as well. And we want to help you in any way we can to get this work done as we continue to drive opportunity for everyone to access the true promise of registered apprenticeship. Thank you and have a great